So welcome all to our second, I guess, workshop / event in what has now become a series of events. I realise that for most of you, you've been getting snippets of information through email. So I thought I'd just take a few minutes at the beginning of this session to, I guess, induct you all to what the idea of this whole series of events is all about. Essentially, we've got two ARC Centres of Excellence. ARC Centre of Excellence for Translational Photosynthesis and the ARC Centre of Excellence in Plant Energy Biology. And the two centres have run with their funding in parallel for the last 6.5 years, and both are ending at the end of this year, at least as a formal ARC Centre of Excellence. And in doing that, we've been encouraged to put on a number of different events to kind of showcase what the centres have achieved and to enable, I guess, future opportunities and legacy for all of you moving forward. So one thing we thought that would be really good and beneficial and useful to our researchers would be to learn a little bit more about the best ways and the best practices around engaging with industry. So we're heading towards an event next month where we're going to have you all sit with the GRDC, Grains Research Development Council, as a representative body of industry, and to engage with them and to get some insights from them, but also to get an opportunity to talk about your own research, but thinking about it a little bit more from a how do I engage with industry and translational application front. With all of that said, this training, we want it to be thought of a lot more broadly than just the GRDC as an endpoint audience. And so we wanted to build in a bit of training and information in the lead up to that would help you think a little bit more about how to engage with different audiences. And that goes above and beyond the GRDC. So hopefully most of you attended the industry engagement information and Q&A session we had a couple of weeks ago, which we were hoping would just give you a bit of a broad overview and a bit of insight into what industry landscape is like. Today is a lot more specific. We've invited Will along from CPAS, and hopefully you've all gathered where he's from and what he does based on a few bios and a lot of information that's been circulating recently. But he is also, or has at least in the past, been very responsible for delivering a number of science communication workshops. So this is very much about how do you communicate your science and how do you do so to different audiences? How do you modify maybe the way that you think about communicating your science? How do you tease out different angles? And how do you consider the endpoint intention of what that communication is about? And so Will is actually used to doing this in person. So this is the first time he's going to be doing this kind of science communication session online. So it is very much a 2-hour online science communication workshop that we are hoping will be very interactive, as Will mentioned, breakout rooms and so forth. So a lot of engagement. Great that a lot of you have come on camera, as we said, jump on and ask questions at any point throughout. But all of this is kind of leading towards at least one core task that we're going to ask you all to do, which is to produce a pitch to industry. Now, in this space online, we've got a number of you representing all of you who put in an expression of interest for our industry engagement event. Some of you have been asked to actually present a pitch to the GRDC on the day of the event in a month's time. Others, while not accepted for putting through a pitch on the day, we are encouraging you still to consider producing a pitch that we will still otherwise distribute to the GRDC. But in all of these cases where you might be building something, we're encouraging you to think about just producing a pitch that is generally for an industry audience. It doesn't have to be specific to the GRDC. This is very much a broad skill set we want you to develop. So please take the GRDC out of your mindsets and think more broadly about industry engagement in general, and consider whether it will be a valuable process to go through to build a pitch, regardless of whether it's actually going to be one of the ones used in the event in a month's time or not. As far as how those pitches are produced, we're very much handing that over to you to go about that however you see fit. But a lot of the training and information that comes through today should support how you want to think about constructing that. And then in addition to that, we did send an email out a week ago, which had the link for today's event. So hopefully you got that. But attached to that was also some information about how to produce a pitch in a video format, which is what we will be using for these events coming up and for distribution. So we would hope that you've all had a look at that before today. And if not, then maybe just pull that up and have that kind of alongside in your minds today as you're thinking about going through this process and thinking about how to communicate. And then after this event, we're going to offer as much support as we can in helping you guys to put those pitches together. we're basically going to let you kind of go off for a couple of weeks to think about and film those. And then we're all going to come together in a series of feedback workshops where you can work with your colleagues who have been a part of this to talk through your various pitches, get some ideas and feedback from one another, and then go about iterating on those and producing your final version, your final video pitch for us to use in a month's time. I'm hoping that that about covers most of what we wanted to touch on, and I've got a few more things I'll just say, but at this point, did anyone have any questions about what this process was about, or anything that they're still a little unsure about even after that little run through? If anyone wants to jump on and ask any questions, we're happy to take those now. Yeah, James, I see your hand up.
Sorry, just something to clarify. So those who were selected to give present a pitch on the day, is that still going to be a pre-recorded video, or will that be a live pitch?
Yeah, great question. So what we've decided to go with is a pre-record, just because these events, when they originally talked about at the beginning of the year, were intended to be in person. We were all gonna go to Canberra and do this. Obviously, circumstances have changed just ever so slightly, and so we figure for an online event with a certain time frame that video records, pre-records are going to be the best way for us to get through those in a nice timely fashion. But we are going to ask you to be present and also to take some questions. So while the pitch is pre-recorded, we want to treat it a little bit almost like you've been there on the day, pitching live and then taking some questions.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, great question, James. Was there anything else anyone wanted clarified at this point? Okay, good. As I said, jump in with questions at any point in time, and hopefully things will become clear across the course of the next 2 hours as well. Just noting that what's been going on in the background has been a committee working on these, an industry engagement committee, which represents both centres and your peers, a number of early career researchers, myself and Natalia. So I should have introduced myself. I'm Karina Price. I'm the Science Communications Officer for Plant Energy Biology. Natalia is the Comms Officer for Translational Photosynthesis. And we also have Sarah in the room who's representing Translational Photosynthesis, but who's been involved in organising some of these things in the background as well. So we're around in addition to the committee. The committee has been listed on all the emails that have gone out. I see a number of the names in the room. I won't go through them all. But feel free to approach any of those committee members if you do have questions as well. We're all here to help, and we have been involved in the background, so have a good handle on what's going on. The other couple of things I just wanted to mention, there was an email that got sent out by Natalia a few days back with a request for you to RSVP if you do intend to produce a pitch. Obviously, those who we've asked to pitch on the day have all confirmed that they are going to go ahead with that, but there are a number of you who we've said weren't accepted for an EOI, but we are still asking or encouraging you to produce a pitch. We would just like to know who actually intends to go ahead with that. So if you can let us know following this session and by the end of tomorrow whether you intend to produce a pitch, it'll help us to put together some of these feedback workshops and just have an idea of numbers. The other thing is Natalia asked me to mention that a survey in regards to today's session will get pinged out in the next 24 hours, and we really appreciate feedback on that as well. It is the first time that either of the centres have done anything quite like this, so we would like to know whether it's been valuable to you and useful and successful. Other than that, as mentioned, we are recording today's session, so if you do need to drop off, hopefully you've still got something you can come back to and look at later. The one thing that might not get recorded or captured will be the breakout sessions, because we will be implementing a number of hands-on activities. So don't stress too much that when you're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty in a breakout room that people are going to be watching it down the track. That part of it will be omitted from the video, but the main core information that Will goes through will be captured so that we can share it later with yourselves and probably with the rest of the centres as well, for those who didn't actually put in an EOI but who are still interested. I think that's all of my notes. Unless there are any more questions, I'm now going to hand over to Will. And really, this is going to be his show for the next hour and a half, 2 hours. Hope you guys enjoy some science communications training. Natalia, myself, Sarah, we're all going to hover around as well because we really want to learn as well. But it does mean that Will have gone through this process. So if you've got any questions, you don't manage to get straight through to Will, you can always ask us questions as well. Alrighty, over to Will.
Fantastic. Thank you, Karina. And thank you, everybody, for jumping in here today. Good morning, good afternoon. I guess some people it's afternoon, some people it's morning. So just to add a tiny bit onto what Karina said, and to flesh a little bit about what we're going to do here. So as Karina said, my name is Will. You probably saw me in the industry engagement session the other day. Some of you I may have met before. But to add a little bit onto that, our Centre for Public Awareness of Science at ANU, our job is to research the relationship between science and society. Our goal is to try and understand how science works in terms of getting knowledge out to the rest of the world, the places where it works well, the places where it doesn't work well, to understand the audiences that science can work with, does work with, should work with, and perhaps isn't working very well with at the moment. But with that research, the second part of our mission is to go out there and help, working scientists like you to engage with different audiences as best you can, to provide our knowledge for you in different sorts of ways. Now, in doing that, we have undergraduate programs, postgraduate programs. You can do a PhD in science communication if you want, but we also have done workshops. Workshops have been a pretty important thing for us over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, as we've worked with a range of groups of scientists around the country, trying to understand the challenges that they face and understand what sorts of things might help people to get across the gap that they're facing. Now, that leads me to my first, I guess, disclaimer here that Karina mentioned a little bit, but I've been running these workshops for 6 or 7 years, and they've all been physical so far. I have run lots of things online in Zoom. I've been teaching online in Zoom actually for a few years now, and some of my classes are great fun in Zoom, but the workshops that I have run for the past 5 or 6 years have been really quite physical and quite hands-on. So a lot of our activities involve you talking to each other in different sorts of scenarios, and then digesting that, exploring how that worked, what didn't work very well. So we will be attempting to use some of those exercises now to help you think through some of those communication challenges. Fingers crossed, they all work perfectly and deliver as well as they have done in physical events. They may not, but let's see how we go, and hopefully we can have a conversation about the meaning of all of those things and be as useful as possible to you as we go forward. There may be a few teething issues, but I'm here to try and work with you on those things. Now, just to add to something that Karina said before, I want to make this a conversation as much as possible. Can you ask questions whenever you want? If you want, you can raise your hand using the participant raise hand function in Zoom. I'm not sure, I can't see where it is for me because I'm the host, but I think if you click on participants, then raise hand, you can do that. So I'll see you in a bit. Or if you can raise your hand in video, you can do that, and I'll try and catch your hand, but if I miss you, I might not see you. Ultimately, I'll keep an eye on the chat as we go, and we can have a conversation there. But make this as conversational as possible. Now, the first thing I'd like you to do is I'd like to know a tiny bit about you before we go into this workshop experience. Just if you could jump into the chat, could you just tell me what stage of career you're at? Are you PhD student, early career, mid-career? Just so I get a feel for where you're all at in terms of the sort of stage of career that you're working in. Thank you, Anna Maria. Excellent. Excellent. Welcome, Tanya, honours student. Excellent to be here. The end of early career. I love that, Cornelia. Senior researcher, mid-career. Great. Fantastic. It's wonderful to have a diversity of career stages here. One of the things that I often realize in these workshops is that as you talk to each other, there is so much advice you can give each other that is incredibly beneficial. Second question I want to understand, and this may be reflective of your career stage, is who here has had experience in working with industry? You can just say, put it in the chat there, just say, yes, I have, or no experience, or something like that. So we've got a couple of people that definitely do. We've got quite a few. Just a few meetings for some, minor for others. Minor. For those of you who have had experience working with industry, we'd really welcome your insights as you're engaging in this process. As much as possible, your expertise, your knowledge will be valuable to everyone else here as well. I don't want to tell anyone how to suck eggs. I know that your knowledge and expertise will be really valuable. Next question then. Could you tell me, again, we can just use the chat room. Who here has pitched a project? Have they pitched something to industry or pitched something to supervisors, to funders, to other bodies? Is this something that people have done a lot, or people have? Karina has, Sam has once, Barbara has, yes. James has done it a lot in academia, but not outside. Interesting point there. Sean says yes, once in a proposal form, yes. A no from Andrea. A pitch to an industry group from Philip. Okay, if I can ask, and you can say you'd prefer not to. Those of you who've had experience in pitching, can you tell us a little bit on how it went? Just, I don't need to know the details. You want everything. Was it a positive experience? Was it a stressful experience? Was it highly engaging? Did you enjoy it? Excellent, Sam. Your one experience worked well. Quit while you're ahead. No, don't quit while you're ahead. Continue doing more. Misaligned expectations. Demanding. Positive, but not much direct feedback. Owen, others can keep typing as you go, but Owen, do you mind if I could draw on you if you have a microphone there? Could you tell us a little bit about the misaligned expectations?
Can you hear me there?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I guess we were pitching, I guess, a not immediately available technique, I guess. They were interested in the kind of data that we could produce, but I guess they were looking for something much cheaper than what we had, much more ready for a production environment than what we had. So I guess we were probably not far enough down the road to commercialization at that point. Okay.
Fair enough. Thank you for that. Honoriode, apologies if I got your name wrong. You noted it was demanding. Could you tell us about that?
Well, you spend time and time preparing for it. It might be a 1 hour or 30 minutes meet and talk, but you spend days, if not weeks, trying to get prepared for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Good on you for spending those days and weeks getting prepared for it. One of the non-success stories that I do hear when people wing it a bit too much. I'm a believer that you should know your story, and you should be rehearsing your pitch all the time, in the sense of, as you're doing the work, you're thinking about, why am I doing this work? What is the reason for it? All of those kinds of things. But rehearsal is an important thing, and pitching, it's something to take seriously. You know, if you take it seriously and you deliver well, it can be demanding, but you know, the results do come from that. Okay, so we've got a few other people saying it was enjoyable, it was positive, which is great. Thank you so much for adding in all of those things there. Now, what I want to do in this workshop is run through a few little exercises that get us to think about how we can talk about our science to a range of different people outside of our discipline. Our goal in all of our science communication is to understand how we can impact people out there, how we can provide a solution for them out there. Now, I'm not going to spend this whole workshop talking to you. Instead, what I'd like to do is run through a series of exercises that help you to think about different scenarios. And then I will digest them and explore them in terms of what they mean for pitching your work when we go out to industry. Some of them may not be instantly apparent in terms of, okay, what is the purpose for this? But my goal is to try and give you a few pointers that will help you in terms of pitching your work. There is not going to be a silver bullet. There's no silver bullet for, okay, I could give you a 2-hour lecture and suddenly you turn into someone who is amazingly able to pitch their work. There's no recipe for it like that. There are a few pointers that I'd like to give you throughout this workshop, and a few things that I know will help. And then I want to give you some ways to practice, and then some ideas that will maybe shift your thinking a little bit towards better ways to pitch. But what I want to do is draw on your expertise and make it as useful as possible to you. So the first exercise, unless anyone has any questions at the moment. Excellent. The first exercise I'd like to run is a short exercise that gets us to think about how we talk about our work to people who are outside of our discipline. Now, one of the key parts of this pitching exercise is how we talk to people who are in industry, inherently outside of our discipline. But we work with many scientists and researchers, people who work with all sorts of different collaborations outside of their discipline. It might be working with policymakers. It might be working with industry. It might be working with other people that will use the results of your research, or it might be working with people in different disciplines. So for example, working from biology to chemistry to physics to history or something like that. A lot of the lessons are parallel. And so what I want to do in this first exercise is think about some of the constraints on talking to someone outside of our discipline. So I'm going to give you a scenario. Now, what I would like you to, one of the big tricks of running this workshop is previously I could give you staggered instructions and talk to you as you go. But once I put you into a breakout room, I can't hear what you're doing and you can't hear me, sadly. It's one of the weaknesses of Zoom. But what I'm going to do in a second is put you into small breakout rooms of 2 people. In each of those rooms, and Natalia, Karina, you're just going to land in a room somewhere because I can't stop you from landing there. In that room, I would like you to do something for me. First of all, decide who is person A and who is person B. Person A, I would like you to imagine that you are from a time 500 years ago. You're from a time when the world looked quite different. The world lived in much smaller villages. There wasn't a lot of technology, and the world was ruled by superstition. So in some parts of the world, people looked at outsiders and outside technology as dangerous and threatening and potentially the work of the devil. Now, you're from that world, but you've stepped into a wormhole in time and arrived here in either Perth or Canberra in 2020. Now, aside from all of the bad bits of 2020 and aside from Zoom, ignore all that. Now, the other person, you are from 2020. You are from now, and you have just run into this person who has arrived from 500 years ago, looking a little bit dazed and confused. You want to welcome them, but you are about to get a very important phone call on your smartphone. So I'd like to give you, person B, 2 minutes to explain the smartphone to this person from 500 years ago. So here's what's going to happen. I'll put you in pairs, in breakout rooms of 2. Say hello to each other. First off, decide who is from 500 years ago and who is from today. The person from today, it is your job to explain the smartphone to the person from 500 years ago without being burnt at the stake. Any questions before we jump into the rooms? Welcome back, everybody. Now, first question. I know that some of you may have had tech issues. Thank you for diving in and seeing how that went. Did you all manage to have, did most of you manage to have someone you can talk to in a group?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. These are quite tight timeframes. Maybe we might expand the timeframes a little bit. But can I ask, is anyone getting burnt at the stake for their explanation of the smartphone? James is wobbling his hand. Victoria's getting burnt. Sam's getting burnt. All right. Let's go with Victoria first. Tell me about it. So this is, you were explaining, and you're nominating yourself.
No, so sorry, I'm in a room with other people. We're doing this exercise together.
If they, how can we fix that?
Sorry about that, everyone. Maybe you might need to go.
She went 500 years ahead instead of 500 years back by the sound of it.
Fair enough. Okay. So was Victoria's partner? Are you not in the same physical room as Victoria?
It's me.
Cornelia, could you tell us? Well, actually, I'm going to ask a question first.
Yeah.
Cornelia, are you going to burn Victoria at the stake?
I didn't think so. I thought she did a really good job.
So, first, a little quick thing to observe here. We scientists are our own worst critics. We often think, oh, I've ruined everything. I've done it really terribly, because, you know, part of our job is we need to be self-critical. We need to think, okay, how did I do that experiment? Not the best. How did I write that paper? Not the best. What can I do better? But that often means we throw ourselves under the bus, and we might self-nominate as terrible when our audience often says it was quite all right. Just bear that in mind in the future. In any presentation, anything out there, the audience is probably happier than you think. And key thing here, who gets to choose if you're getting burnt at the stake, Victoria? It's not you. It's Cornelia gets to choose. Sorry, I'm pointing in my win. Yeah. Cornelia gets to choose if you're getting burnt at the stake. So anyway, Cornelia, tell us about Victoria.
I have done this exercise with Karina before, so I asked if Victoria wanted to do it. And so she gave it a go, and she said it's a box that allows you to hear a voice from someone else, and the sound travels and you can put it in the box. I think that was was it? I don't know what people were like 500 years ago, but I thought that was a pretty good go, because I found it impossible, and I'm sure I got burnt last time when I tried.
Well, look, Cornelia, I'm going to say that you sound fine. Victoria's just being harsh on herself. So, all right, let's take that as the lesson for now. Don't be too harsh on yourself.
Okay.
James, you wobbled your hand. This is you nominating yourself as not doing well enough.
Yes, so I was paired with Joanna, and I think perhaps the same issue of overcriticism of myself, but and my approach was to, you know, explain that it was I was speaking into it, and then it was sending the sound in a way that couldn't be heard until it hits another black stone mirror, and then it will make the sound again. Which
you're using words that come from their world. Black stone mirror, sound, I guess, might be, but sounds like you're doing some of it correctly. So, Joanna, did you not like James's explanation?
Yeah, I mean, like, as a person from, you know, living 500 years ago, I was like, oh, the devil is living in the mirror.
Yeah.
Because he said, oh, look, I have a small mirror here and you can see. And I asked, can you see yourself or whom? It's, you know, devil is living in the mirror and stuff. But then he explained me that there will be some small stones which will light up and then you will see images. So I probably would be interested in just, you know, looking at it as well.
So you were worried at first, but you became interested.
Yeah, because
okay.
I accepted that there is no devil inside.
Okay. All right. Well, you changed fairly quickly there.
Yeah.
Didn't seem to be too long of a journey. What was it about the transition? What was the key thing that made it okay for you?
Yeah, probably that he continued, right? Like he continued to explain what's inside, right? Like there are small stones lighting up, that it's not, nothing forbidden or something devilish.
Okay. All right. Well, we might come to that in a second. Sam, are you saying you're getting burnt?
Yes, but I think I will actually get burnt.
All right. Tell us about it.
I probably did a poor job of explaining it in terms of that it was something that allowed me to speak to people that aren't there, which definitely sounds like a witch.
So is that how you explained it? You said this is something that...
I did, and then I thought, no, that sounds, yes, a bit like magic.
Who was Sam's partner?
Me.
What do you think, Barbara?
Yes, and I actually think she did a good job, because she started with something that warmed it to myself. She said that it was to talk to other people, like family or members from your village, and immediately I could see a purpose for myself. So I think that made it, the explanation of how it didn't really matter. It's the purpose that what I could use it for.
All right, that's awesome. So I thought Sam saying that you're going to get burnt, and here Barbara is saying that you're doing quite well. You've explained the purpose of this. So, well, I'll actually come some more in that in a second. But we've got one more. Alex, you've said that you're, where are you, Alex, there? You said that you were getting burnt?
Yeah, I guess the difficult question I got was, well, how is this not dangerous or witchery or whatever? And I didn't really have any analogy for people from 500 years ago to understand, like, so I really struggle on that question. And I guess the answer I gave was, well, if you're really scared about this thing, just break it and it will not work again. So that wasn't really good. So
okay, who was Alex's partner?
So Philip.
Philip, were you okay with Alex's explanation?
Well, not initially. I was a bit worried about some of the things he was talking about, but when he said that he could use it to talk to the neighbouring village, I started to warm to it a bit, because I thought it might be quite good for me to perhaps sell my sheep to the neighbouring village. I could do that a bit more efficiently. So once he kind of made it something that I could potentially use for my benefit, then I sort of warmed up to it.
Okay. Look, this is strange, because 4 people have self-nominated as doing a bad job, and yet all of their partners have said no, it was actually quite good, and I drew a few things out of there. So what I'd like to do, I'll turn in a second to people who are quite happy with the smartphone, but it seems I've already got a few of you already. But you can see a bit of a theme straight away with people that are successfully communicating are not talking about how the smartphone works. You know, I do this exercise with a whole bunch of different scientists. Quite often we get the physicists and the computer scientist people that might end up talking about radio waves and satellites and things like that, which is not going to be very easy to connect with people from 500 years ago. But instead, if we start talking about how something is useful, and then using metaphors and analogies that map to their world, then we might be in a place where people won't be so worried about it. Talking to Philip about how you could talk with the people in the neighboring villages, then that's language from their world, metaphors from their world, and straight away telling people how it's useful. So other people, were there people that were particularly happy with the smartphone? Put it in the chat, or is everyone else on the fence? Okay.
I was quite happy. I was the one who came from 500 years ago, and I had Sean as a partner, and he pretty much started explaining to me that I could use it as a messenger, kind of, just that I don't use the messenger anymore. And what I quite liked is that he said everyone can use it. So to me, that kind of made it a little less sort of devilish, what you kind of said in the introduction, right? Because I kind of thought if everyone can use it, can't be that bad. Maybe it's more helpful.
It's socially acceptable if a lot of people have it.
Yeah.
Great. That sounds like a great explanation. So Sally says Natalia likened it to a musical instrument that could be played from far away, which got me around not knowing what sound waves were. Excellent. Okay. The key reason that we use this exercise is that, and we'll flip this around and do another version in just a second, is that it says straight away what we need to do in terms of explaining something is come to their world, come to the world of the audience. First of all, that means using the language of the audience. That means we can't use the word smartphone, computer, radio waves, any sort of jargon that we might use to explain from our world. But of course, parallels directly in how we will communicate our science. We have to not use the language of our science, but instead use the language of our audience. The words that they use, the things that they're used to. Similarly, we need to use analogies and metaphors that are from their world. So Natalia, Sally says Natalia likened the mobile phone to a musical instrument that you can hear from far away. That's great. I haven't actually, well, I've heard a lot of people saying it's like church bells that you might hear from far away, or smoke signals that you might see from far away, or something like that. But using metaphors and analogies that liken the smartphone to something from their world. It's one of the earliest and most important lessons of any form of science communication is we can't put things in our terms. We have to go through our pitch document, our public-facing writing, our public speech, or anything like that, and get rid of any term that we're used to using with our friends here, but we don't use with outsiders, or we can't use with outsiders. Now, if anyone had any questions on that, ask away, but we can dive in and flip to the next version of this exercise. Okay, what I'm going to do is put you back into your same group, now your same pair. Some of you may have left. If you have left, if your partner has left, then just shoot me out and I'll put you into another group. So I'll put you back into your same pair, but this time, the other person is from 500 years ago. So the other person is from 500 years ago, and they've fallen through the wormhole and arrived here in Canberra or Perth or on Zoom in today. But on their way through their wormhole, they got their finger caught on the edge and it might be broken. So the person from today, can you convince the time traveler to put their hand into an X-ray machine? I'll give you 2 minutes-ish to work it out. So I'll put you back in your groups. Other person is the time traveler. The time traveler has a possibly broken finger. And the person from today, can you convince them to put it into an X-ray machine? Welcome back, everybody. How did we go this? Sorry, what was that?
It was hard.
Was it hard? Which side? You're explaining the X-ray? Why was it hard, Karina?
I kind of took the approach of appealing more to the person's condition and pain and circumstances rather than trying to explain the technology, which worked at first, I think. But then I was with Megan, and then of course she starts asking, well, is it going to hurt? And then in explaining whether it won't hurt and saying more, she started to ask more questions, and then we started to get into the technical stuff, and then I suddenly found myself having to explain the technology without using words like technology and machine. I said machine, she said, what's a machine? And then it almost got trickier with time. I spiraled.
That's really interesting, Karina. Megan, how did Karina go?
Yeah, I thought she did well. Yeah, like it's so hard, but I did the smartphone one, and I said device, so her machine was kind of the same sort of thing. But she explained when I asked how if it was going to break open my hand, how was the machine going to see inside of it? And but she came up with a good analogy.
Yeah.
She was saying, if you hold a leaf up to the light, you can sort of see through it. And
right.
So I thought that was really good, because it was like nothing's actually going to penetrate or hurt. It's just going to shine something through to see. I thought that was good.
Awesome, that's a great analogy. Well, let's jump back then and go. Is anyone getting burnt for this machine that can see inside you? Oh, we got a much more declarative no shake from James there. So no one's getting burnt for this machine there. That suggests learning straight away. Fantastic work. Who here is happy to put their finger into the X-ray machine? Victoria's happy, James is happy, Sean's happy, Alex is happy. Excellent, great work. All right, Sean, tell us about your partner. How did they explain the X-ray machine?
Yeah, so I was with Elkie, so she explained it as it would paint a picture, and that the light would reflect off differently from bones compared to my flesh. So I wouldn't actually have to take my flesh away first to have a look. And that picture would come up at the end, and then actually a doctor could then see that and know how to help out afterwards. And there wouldn't be any pain during the process.
I do like, you've got the analogy, it's like painting a picture, won't see the flesh, but just see the bones. But also stressing something pretty important there wouldn't be any pain in the process. We do have to remember, whilst a scientific explanation, a pure science explanation might focus on the details of how an X-ray machine works. Again, I'll pick on the physicists and say, they might go to, what an X-ray is and all of that kind of stuff. There are some things that the person you are talking to cares a lot more about than the detail of the X-ray machine. Is it going to hurt? Is it going to make it worse? I'm worried about my pain. We'll come to that in a second. So who else was happy? James, your partner was happy? Who's James's partner?
Joanna was my partner, and she was trying to convince me to put my finger in. And I came at it from the point of view that if I was in a lot of pain, I'm very willing to accept any help. And so...
Yeah. So he was really easy to convince.
It was really easy to convince.
Well, if there's a problem,
yes,
and somebody has a solution, I'm very inclined not to question whether the devil's behind it. I'm willing to accept that solution, because anything to get out of pain. I know from real life experience, if I'm in a lot of pain, I will take anything a doctor gives me, or even
James
not a doctor.
offered that maybe it will be easier to cut it off. So I said, no, wait, we still maybe can check it before we cut things off. So
this is awesome understanding here, James and Joanna. I'm going to actually step away from just saying, you're saying, oh, if there's a problem in this pain, I'll do whatever, and reframe this, because what you have done here is framed any explanation around James's key value. And right now, for that particular example, James's key value is that he is in pain. And you are far more likely to be successful if you are communicating with someone when you take their values into account. So many of us in the world of science, we come to any communication moment with our values. How cool is my X-ray machine? I love my X-ray machine. It can see inside you. Did you know it can use more spectrum of X-ray light than anything else? It was invented 100 years ago. No one cares. No one cares about that. The person, the patient, the time traveler in this example, cares about their finger hurting, and they don't want it to hurt anymore. They want the pain to go away. So if you're framing your communication around people's values, then you are far more likely to be successful. I think if we take these two examples together, both talk a lot about the language that we have to use. We have to use the language from their world. We have to use analogies from their world. But also, if we are framing it around their values, the things that they care about, my finger being in pain, but also probably, is it going to hurt more? Is this, is this normal? Is this something that is safe? Then we are far more likely to be successful. These are two probably of the most important lessons for any moment of communicating your science. Framing things in their terms and about what they care about. Let's just hear a little bit more. Yeah, Natalia, yeah.
But just one question, because one thing that concerns me is, for example, how much I know about that world. Like when Sally came to that world, I know very little about what happened 500 years ago. So I know very little about what will be their concerns too, and about. So that is a thing that concerns me, because then you can't explain to them very well if you don't know what they want to know. Do you know what I mean?
It's almost like you're setting me up for the next exercise, Natalia. I would say that the first job of any moment when you are attempting to communicate is to understand the values of your audience. Well, to understand who your audience is. And so I have defined your audience for this particular example as someone from 500 years ago. Now, we all know that That's a very broad category. I don't know how many people were alive 500 years ago, 1 billion people, but there are quite a lot of different people 500 years ago, and I didn't give you any definition there. We could expand that definition by some sort of demographic criteria. We could say how old they were, how educated they were. We could provide their gender. We could provide, well, we could provide language, of course. I didn't provide anything there. That helps. That helps. And something that I would always encourage you to do, I prepared a graph here. I'll come to it in a second. I used it for a class a little while ago. It's always important to understand demographically, objectively, the audience that we're working with. So this might mean if we are talking to the international conference of your discipline, of all of the professors around the world, they understand it a certain way that is different from industry, that is different from policymakers, that is different from school children. So those demographics are really important. And before you're about to do any presentation, any pitch, any conversation, we should understand as much as possible how educated they are, how old they are, all of those kinds of things. But the other way to understand any audience, and in fact both are relevant, is almost orthogonal. It's what they value. So, you know, even within the room of chemistry professors, there will be some chemistry professors that deeply care about this issue or that issue, some that care deeply about this thing or that thing. Like this one from 500 years ago, there will be some people who very much care about witch burning, and some people who don't care about witch burning. Some people who care a lot about church, about other things. And so our job at the beginning of any moment of communication should be to attempt to understand both who someone is demographically, the objective sorts of criteria, and who someone is in terms of their values. This is what they care about. And I'll run an exercise on that in just a second. But I just want to go, was anyone else successful in getting their friend to put their hand in the X-ray machine?
Cornelia was fantastic. She said right off, it's just like, you know, you hold a piece of paper in front of a candle, and she reassured me that it wouldn't hurt, and that it's a specially made candle. It can't be something that everyone can have, but everyone can use it.
Yep, that's a great analogy. That's yeah, really works really well.
And Sally was very good. Like she said, it's like bats, you know, bats see things that you can't see, and then you can understand, like they can see. And the same, this machine can see things that we can see. And
yeah.
Just with our eyes, so it's quite good.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I normally get when, and some of you may still have done this, when we do this exercise physically, people do spend a lot more time using body language to communicate, empathizing with each other, demonstrating that they care. Those things are really critical. I can't see what you did when you were in your breakout rooms. Maybe you did. But similarly, a lot of people will also volunteer to put their hand into the X-ray machine. Did anyone do that? Barbara did. So did you, or you were just nodding?
No, after Sam actually suggested that, I was the one explaining, but she suggested, why don't you get me to, why don't you show me how, whether it hurts.
What a yeah. helpful colleague there.
Exactly.
So again, the things that people will help them to be convinced or to bear the risk on aren't necessarily understanding the details of how things work, but understanding that you might have their best interests at heart, or that you will bear the risk with them, that you are walking in the same direction as them. If again, we spend our time focused on the details of the machine, how much we love the machine, then we're not likely to convince people and not likely to connect with people. Does anyone have any questions about this exercise before we keep going? Any things that you observed that worked really well or were tricky? One thing that is a common lesson from this experiment, is that I often get people saying the smartphone is a gift from God, or something like that, or the X-ray machine is a gift from God, which, based on my previous definition of trying to come into their world, use their language, is doing the right things in that direction. But what's the problem with doing that?
Trust, I suppose.
Trust, absolutely, because what do you? Perhaps you do believe the smartphone is a gift from God, but probably I would guess most of you don't believe the smartphone is a gift from God. So what people are doing there is coming into their someone else's world with perhaps the best intentions, but actually lying and ending up saying something that you believe to be untrue, and that will be incredibly problematic. So I think it's a really important thing that we attempt to empathize with people and attempt to come into their world in terms of language, but not stepping all the way in there into saying something that is untrue. This is a balance that we will always have to work with in the sciences, to attempt to step into metaphors and analogies that make sense with our partners on the outside, but we always have to remain true to what we know from our scientific research. I don't have examples that will suit all of your research, but there is a tension that we will always have to hold, that we've got to use language that parallels and analogies that parallel, but there may be a limit sometimes, and we do have to hold true to what we understand from our scientific perspective. Okay, next activity. I said before that if you're attempting to communicate with someone, the first thing you should do is understand who they are. And this applies a lot to how you're pitching to industry. So I'm going to do two activities before we, in the rest of this workshop. This first one should be a little bit quicker, and the second one will be a bit longer. This next one is thinking about how we understand who someone is in terms of their values. What I'm going to do is break you into new breakout rooms of 2 people. So you'll meet someone different. In this breakout room, I'd like you to time each other. Time each other for an activity that you'll each get a chance to do. The first person, what I would like you, well, both of you, I would like you to think of something that drives you mad. Something that makes you furious. Something that enrages you. So, for example, it could be those teenagers that don't pick up their washing. It could be the share house person that drinks your milk. It could be the person in the swimming pool that swims in the wrong lane. Oh, that's the one that gets me. It could be dealing with lockdown. I don't know. I'd like you to each think of something that drives you mad. I'm going to put you in the breakout rooms, and I would like the first person to rant about that topic for 2 minutes. Now, 2 minutes will seem like an eternity. I guarantee you this now. It will seem incredibly long, incredibly painful, because the second person, the person who is listening, you're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to smile. You're not allowed to nod. You're not allowed to empathize. You're not allowed to ask questions. You're just there to listen. Just listen. So I'll give you 2 minutes to do the first person, and then flip over, and then 2 minutes to do the second person. So I will broadcast a message when to flip over, and then so you each get a chance to rant for 2 minutes. Actually, no, let's just do one person, then we'll come in and have a chat, and then we'll do the other person and have a chat. Okay, new breakout rooms. Ranting. Was it great or was it horrible?
Horrible.
Horrible. James has got a thumbs up though.
For hours.
I typically find there's 10-15% of people that could have gone for as long as you want, and probably 80 to 85% of people found it one of the most horrible experiences of their life. It's just not nice. There could be structural reasons why some people are able to rant, but anyway, we'll come to that later. Those who are listening, and I admit that probably we lose a bit of that, the empathy, because we're doing this through Zoom. How was it listening?
I hated not being able to respond and look at Sally and give her feedback. It was awful.
Yeah, that's what I've always thought too. And this is what everyone has always said. This is a horrible experience both to rant and to listen. There is something, and this isn't the purpose of this activity, but I always draw on this, something to remember in this though, that every audience actually wants to empathize with you. The audience, you know, you're in a public audience, you're in an international conference audience. Okay, there might be some cranky people, but in general, most people in the audience want you to do well. Most people want you to tell a great story, show some new research, show something awesome, tell me something great. People don't want to sit through a presentation and watch someone suffer. It's the worst thing in the world. So just remember, you know, that everyone in an audience is there to see you do well. So just hold that as something to remember whenever you are presenting. Anna Maria, you don't believe that? I don't know.
Sorry, I was laughing about something else.
Yeah, it's all right. That's all right. Okay. Anything else anyone observed from doing that? All right. Second person, you get your turn now. As before, the other person will now rant, and the person who ranted first time, it's your job to listen. Keep your face still. Don't nod, don't engage, don't empathize, just listen. Back into your breakout rooms, 2 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you too enjoyed ranting or being passive as much as your colleague. Horrible or great?
Horrible.
I'm really sorry to put you through that, but there is a purpose. Okay. Now what I would like you to do is I'm going to go around the Zoom, and I might just do this via the list of participants I have here. I think is sorted alphabetically. And what I would like you to do is introduce your partner that you just had in the group to the rest of us. But I'd like you to use this format. Hi, I'd like you to meet my new friend, Karina. Karina cares deeply about, you can say one word, you can say a sentence, but I don't want to hear anything negative. I want you to take that rant and turn it upside down. Tell me what the positive value your friend had underneath that rant. So I've got it. Well, I'm just going to go with, no, actually, I'll go in the order that's in my thing. Karina didn't do it. Tanya, you're first up in my screen. Could you introduce your friend, whoever it was?
Yes, so I met Bhagya. Down at the bottom, right?
Right down the bottom, yep.
The same in your screen. And I'm just talking about what she ranted about, was it?
No, don't talk about what she ranted about. Tell me, I'd like you to use this format. Meet my new friend, Bhagya. Okay, you don't have to say friend, I know it's weird. She cares deeply about,
right,
but make it the positive. Just give us one word.
Yes. So this is my new friend Bhagya. She is very passionate and cares deeply about people sticking their chewing gum underneath bus seats and underneath tables.
Okay, so that sounds negative to me. What's the positive word that's on the other side of that?
She cares about public property and the environment.
Cool, great, excellent. Bhagya, would you like to introduce Tanya?
I would like to introduce Tanya, my new friend. She was going crazy about people throwing cigarettes on the roads.
Okay, I can't hear the negative. It hurts my ears. Give me the positive. What does Tanya care about?
She really cares about the environment and the people, and then animals getting hurt from the cigarettes being throwing to the road.
Just don't tell me about the cigarettes, but yes, she cares about the environment. She cares about animals. Natalia, did you participate?
Yes, so meet my friend Samantha, and she cares deeply about public health and public clean infrastructure and environment, and clean environment.
Sounds like a theme so far. Thank you. Sam, would you like to introduce Natalia?
Yeah, so meet my new friend Natalia. She cares deeply about the environment.
Thank you. Barbara.
Yeah, I've just met Yuzhen, and she is a very conscientious student. She's a PhD student, and she really likes to please her supervisor. So she goes to a lot of it, to a great extent to understand what her supervisor wants and tries to deliver that every meeting that they have.
Excellent, excellent. So respect and care for the supervisor. Yuzhen, would you like to introduce Barbara?
My partner Barbara cares deeply about environmental issues, precisely the plastic waste, and also adolescent education.
Excellent, education, that's great. Can't hear the plastic waste, it's got to be the positive environment. But Joanna, you're on mute. Joanna? Joanna? I'll unmute you.
Sorry, I just realized. Sorry, I'm back here.
You went a long way.
Hi, meet my friend Connie. Connie cares deeply about environment and the cleanliness of Midland.
Thank you. Connie?
This is great. I met my friend Joanna, and she works very hard to achieve good quality RNA extractions.
Cares about good quality RNA. I don't know what a bad quality RNA extraction is, but that's very nice. That's good. Elke.
Hi there. Please meet Philip, and he very deeply cares about good or positive social interaction in public.
Excellent. I do too. Philip, what does Elke care about?
I meet my new friend Elka. She really cares deeply about children and her kids and her role as a parent. She loves them even though they complain.
Oh, no. She loves them. Fair enough. There you go. Sally.
Meet my friend Victoria, who cares very deeply about efficient transport networks.
Nice. I can guess the rant. I'm not going to. Victoria.
Please meet my friend Sally. She cares deeply about organisation in the lab.
Yes. I imagine many people empathise with that. James.
Please meet my friend Sean. He cares very deeply about the use of evidence in arguments and debates.
Oh, good. Sean.
I meet my friend James. He cares very deeply about personal responsibility with the environment.
Great. Corinne?
I met my friend Megan, and she cares deeply about her son and doing her very best for her family and her work.
Great. Doing best for their family. Megan?
Hi, my friend Corinne. She cares also deeply about her family and her children, and she likes to make sure that her child is really well looked after.
Excellent. Andrea?
So I met my new friend Rui, and he deeply cares about his wife and his family, and yeah, to make them happy, and yeah, about harmony in the family.
Oh, harmony in the family, that's a good one. Rui?
I met my friend Angela. She cares deeply about how to organize time wisely and become more productive.
Good. Where are we? Anna Maria.
Meet my friend Jay. He is a very calm and collected person and isn't dissatisfied with anything in particular.
Not quite a value, but anyway. Jay.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Meet my friend Maria. She deeply cares about the quality of pizzas. So if you want to get a high quality pizza, she is the right person to ask.
High quality pizza. Okay. All right. I can guess the rant underneath there, but anyway, has everyone gone, or has anyone, your screens have moved around as I'm doing this? Excellent. Okay. the reason we do this exercise is to show that underneath anything that anyone says or does are values. Underneath any action that anyone ever takes, sometimes it will be more opaque. A rant is quite a good way to get people to show what their values are. But underneath anything anyone ever does is values. It's our job as we communicate to attempt to understand what people care about. If we understand what people care about, then we're more likely to see how we can line up with them, see how our project might line up with them, and we might get them to put their hand into the X-ray machine. We should be always attempting to understand when we are preparing to communicate with someone, when we're pitching or when we're already in the moment of engaging with someone, to understand, okay, what words do they use? What are they trying to achieve? What are their goals? What are their values? What do they want? Only then can we actually have success. I mean, you imagine the difference between a pitch that is just generic. You write 3 minutes of your project and you explain what your project is to the world, then who is necessarily going to care about it? Versus you talk to someone, I don't know, a business group, a farmer, a company, something like that, and they potentially have a problem that you may directly be able to solve. If you are then able to say, look, I understand, you've been working with this problem for quite some time. You've been trying to solve that thing. You've had this difficulty. I've got something that might help with that. You're far more likely to be successful. Understanding where they are is far more important than honing your words. Far more important. So these will be the first two things that I would say in any moment of science communication. Understand your audience, understand what the words they use, the values they have, and understand the goals that you might then make based on that. There's no point in communicating if you don't do that. There's literally no point. You're just saying words. You know, a lot of people I see student presentations, I see PhD student presentations, I see international conference presentations where people view their goal as getting the words out. You know, they've written their 1,000 word speech and they think, okay, if I say every one of these words and then I get off this stage, then I have done my job. But what would be the point in that if they're not targeted towards the people in the room, if you're not changing their opinion or providing something useful or valuable to them? So this is an essential part of communicating your work. Understand someone's values, understand what they care about, and put it in their terms. Does anyone have any questions on that?
I guess I have a question in so much as how do you figure out the values of your audience, especially if we package it in the context of what these guys are going to have to do. We're talking about industry, so maybe where you're headed with this. Yeah. And also maybe just a comment on advice in the context of the task at hand would be, I guess, going into it having picked an audience in your mind and deciding that that's the audience you're going to focus on, because obviously you do something that could be generalist use, but are you accepting that you might not be playing to everybody who sits in that audience space? You've honed in and choosing one and hoping that it'll also have value for others in front of you. But is that a better approach to sort of pick a selection or go with a generalist approach if you don't know how broad your audience is?
Okay, so what I'll do first is how do you find out about your audience, and then who do you pick in that audience that you might target? How do you find out about your audience? You're researchers. You are, your job is to do science, to do research, to understand some challenge. I would say to you that a key part of your job when you are developing a pitch or developing anything is to do research about those people. Now, that may mean that you have a few weeks beforehand to look into their website, to understand, okay, what are the sorts of things that they're working on? The more that you can target down, if you're pitching to all of the GRDC, that's going to be a little bit more open than pitching to one particular company or one particular farmer, which is going to be more precise. So I think as much as possible, do research, read what they have said before, read what's on anyone's website, read and see what their challenges are. You can spend time doing that, and that time will be more productive than just starting with PowerPoint. If you just, the instant you just load up PowerPoint and put your stuff into it, then you're missing the point. The second thing, you can always do research in the moment as well. You can't with a video pitch, I accept that, but if you are doing some other form of presentation, I mean, the first questions I asked you are a form of me trying to understand where you're up to, what sorts of challenges you might be working on. If I was doing this workshop physically, and if we had a longer day, if we spent half a day or a whole day doing this, I'd actually ask you a lot of questions. I want to know as much as possible about the challenges that you're facing, where you've had successes, where you've had failures, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what you're trying to achieve but is not quite being achieved. The more that I can ask questions of you, the more likely I'm going to be to have success. You won't be able to do that in your 3-minute pitch video. I accept that. But there will be other public speaking opportunities or other speaking opportunities where you can ask questions. The other classic sort of pitching moment that we often talk about is the elevator pitch. You know, how do you get your research across really quickly in that 30-second moment when you're sharing the elevator with the CEO of whoever? It's a really useful thing to think about. But I think the first things we should be doing is understanding, okay, who is that CEO and what are their challenges? What do they care about? And maybe if you don't know it, there's no point just hammering 30 seconds of words at them until you know more about who they are and what they care about.
I'll just chime in here and add that this opportunity in a month's time should be viewed as very much a practice opportunity. It is not an end game, but rather a starting point for many of you to try out a pitch with an audience. And the way that we're structuring that day will actually provide an opportunity for you to first showcase your pitches, but to then sit down, not one-on-one, but in a smaller group with a specific member of the GRDC to go through those pitches and get feedback on them from the GRDC. So don't go into it feeling like you need to know everything at that point. It's a midway point between you're learning a little bit now heading in, but you'll also learn a lot more on the day and having gone through the process. I just wanted to make sure that was clear and put that out.
Absolutely. And if I can add even further onto that I said at the beginning, there's no silver bullet for communicating your work, except when I say there's a couple of golden rules. I often say that. But one of the main things is you just have to practice and you have to be experimental. Like you're scientists, so you understand that this experiment might work, this experiment might not work. And then what should I do? I should learn from that experiment and do things slightly differently next time, slightly different, and continue trying to work on your communication. Never expect that you will either get the perfect 300 words, because the perfect 300 words is only perfect for one person, not for this person over here, or that you'll nail it first go, and that's it. Don't worry about that. Think about it as a long-term conversation where you want to keep honing your skills at talking about your research.
Will, are you going to go through the exercise where they have to go from several minutes down to?
Only literally now. Only literally now.
All right, good. Because if we're not, then it was something I was going to say. I'll circulate afterwards. Is a great exercise.
No. So this is the last thing, the last exercise that I want to cover, and it's an exercise that we run a lot with a lot of different people, where it's a chance for you to talk about your work and to hone, if not the pitch, but the story that you are telling about your work. What we do is we'll break into small groups. We might do it in groups of 3. No, actually, I might do it in groups of 2. So it'll just be one person alternating, just to keep the time down. And what I'd like you to do is to think about the story of your work. Now, I haven't given you very much in terms of thinking about the story of your work. We often spend actually quite a fair bit of time talking about, okay, what is story? What is the challenge? But I'll give you a very quick format that I find useful for a lot of researchers in thinking about the story of their work. It's called the and, but, therefore structure. It came from a colleague of ours in America, but I think actually before that it came from Hollywood screenwriting. In fact, even might have come from the South Park writers, but somewhere else. But the reason this format works is a story starts when there is a contradiction, a twist, something, a problem. So we can define a story as a person has values and they're trying to achieve something, but there is something in the way. You know, Lord of the Rings, you might think the story is basically Frodo wants to look after the Shire, but the magic ring is causing problems. He has to destroy the ring. The whole story is based on that. The same with your research. Can you put your research into a format that says, I'm trying to achieve this, but there's a problem, but we haven't found this yet, but we don't know about that, but something's getting in the way, but we need money, but we need contacts, but we need access, but we need something. What I'd like you to do is, actually, no, we will do it in groups of 3, but I'll do it smaller. What I'm going to do is in groups of 3, take turns, and we'll come back after the first minute, so I'll tell you the instructions. But basically, one person is going to tell the story of their research for 1 minute. Then I would like the other people in that group to give them feedback for 1 minute. After that, I'll bring you back in here just to, this is where breakout rooms gets really challenging. Then you'll go back into those groups, and the same person will tell the story of their research for 30 seconds and then get feedback. And then the same person will tell the story of their research for 15 seconds and get feedback. Our goal here is to get rid of as much extra detail and to strip down to what is the core story of my research. Then you can add in more detail for your longer pitch later, but working on what is my story and then going from there. Take this as a really useful learning exercise, because you'll have 2 people listening to you that will say, okay, I loved when you talked about this bit of the story, but this bit didn't work. So we'll do the first 1 minute version and 1 minute of feedback, and then we'll come back in here and I'll remind you of the instructions. So I'll put you in groups of 3. One person will go first, tell the story of their research for 1 minute, and then give them 1 minute of feedback. Any questions before we go in there? At this point, I'd love to be able to talk into your breakout rooms to give you further instructions as you go. This one may be one of the more challenging ones to work in this way. It's a shame, because it's such an important exercise for us to give you this chance to talk about your own work. Okay, everyone get through that 1 minute version and give some feedback. Now, the reason I'd love to be able to talk into your breakout rooms is I neglected to give one instruction. You may have done this already. I wanted your feedback to focus on the story. Did the story work? Did you care? Were you engaged? Occasionally people give feedback on the method, and that's not the purpose of today. That's for different conversations later. Okay, first person, you've now had a chance to talk for 1 minute with your group. Now what I'd like you to do is give a 30-second version of of the story of your work. Take out the bits that people weren't interested in and focused on the so what. Focus on the problem, the thing that's really critical. Get rid of the extraneous details. Focus on the essential stuff. So same person talks, this time for 30 seconds, and then give them feedback again. Okay, thank you for doing that. I can't quite listen in to hear how you went. Normally in this version, what we do in this process is a 2 minute version, feedback, 1 minute version, feedback, 30-second version, feedback, and 15-second version, second version, feedback. The goal being is very much to hone towards your story, to get rid of the extra details, hone to your story. Then you can put back in more details that are useful later, but once you understand your story, that's an essential place to start. I won't do that now. I won't do the 15-second version right now. I'd rather give the other 2 people in the group a chance to do it rather than move on, continue there. Did anyone have any questions or comments from the difference between the 30-second version and the 1 minute version?
I think
I think Elka's got her hand up.
I actually found this really hard. I mean, it was quite after the first one, right? Right after the first one. And I have to say, I first wrote blank.
Yep.
I was with Elka and I was going to make a similar comment. I think the biggest challenge maybe was absence of preparation as well. Like we're going through an exercise, but then also having to do that off the cuff adds a whole second layer of, well, I haven't been able to think through what is and isn't important. So there's sort of 2 elements to this. And Elka did very, very well.
Excellent, excellent, good. I would say that something we should all aim towards is being in a place where we can talk about our research to a range of different audiences off the cuff. Now, at the beginning of a project, of course, that's really tricky. It's like, I don't quite really even know yet. But I think we should attempt to rehearse as much as we can all the time our conversations. One of the ones that I think is really useful is the uncle at the barbecue. So you run into your uncle at the barbecue, and your uncle says, "Oh, okay, what are you working on? What are you doing?" And at that moment, we should start paying attention quite a lot, because if our uncle quite quickly regrets, and you can see he's like, I want to go and go somewhere else and get some food or something like that. Or have you made your uncle really excited and saying, "Oh, is that like this? Does it matter like this?" I'm assuming your uncle's a good person here. Then as much as possible, that's the goal that we should get. So we should think about these moments of communication with people outside of our world, outside of our scientific world, as a chance to practice and rehearse. And it might not always be good. In fact, it might often be terrible, but we should notice when it doesn't work very well and try to do something different next time. Other observations or questions?
I can just add my 2 cents worth to that comment alone. As a science communicator, I was a scientist, I don't have formal qualifications in science communication, but I've been through that process over the last 5 years. Every time you step in front of an audience, you say something and you get, the resounding quiet or the weird looks, and you've got to iterate over time. And over time, you start to learn what does and doesn't work with various audiences. So I guess it's only to say, don't stress if things don't necessarily bounce as well as you'd like them the first time round. It is a process, and it does take practice, and it is bravery to get out there and give it a crack. Absolutely. And iterate on what you come out with. So these exercises are great in that way. It's a chance.
And don't be worried if you don't be worried. Flip it around. If you find a great metaphor or a great analogy or a great way of framing your research, then use it every single time. Or if it works for some audiences, use it there, and others don't use it. Don't feel like you have to invent a new way of talking it each time. If you discover a great metaphor for talking about your research, hold on to it, and that makes it so much easier to talk about what you're doing. All right, let's give the second person a go. But what we're going to do here is roll straight through you. So I will put you in your groups and do 1 minute, and then give 1 minute of feedback, and then 30 seconds, and then give a minute of feedback, and then we'll come back in here. So I'll give you all up. What does that add up to? 3 minutes and 30 seconds. I'll give you a bit more than that, but enough. So someone else time in your group. So 1 minute feedback, 30-second version feedback.
Yes.
If you can, think about ways that you can institute similar sorts of things for each other in other, in your normal work. Admittedly, this is very short and quick. Finding ways to run short presentations past each other. I'm going to work on this, or I'm going to frame it this way in a presentation, can be a really valuable thing that you can do for each other. You can set things up where you can say, this is the way I'm going to talk about it. Does this work? Now, yes, you're going to get 1 minute 30 of feedback now, which is not enough to change anything, really. It might give you some sort of tips for the future. But if you can get to a place where you start talking about your communication and talking about the things that work and the things that don't work, and getting feedback can be a really valuable thing. Any observations or questions on that before we dive into the third person to give them a go?
Something that came through in ours, again, both of our guys did an amazing job, but just trying to get to that 30 seconds and still trying to put all of the challenge in there. And so my feedback to Phil was just that even in trying to put all the detail of what the challenge is not necessary. You can probably capture it with just something a bit more simple, and trust your audience to kind of understand what the significance of something you're saying is, so you don't have to fill in all of the gaps in order to keep word counts and timing down.
Normally, if I'm running this physically, I get to make the joke, don't just talk faster. you know, get rid of the other bits. Don't just talk faster every time. And it's really disappointing. I can't make it through this, but you do see a lot of people trying to just fill in the same amount of detail. Key thing will be removing stuff that isn't necessary. But you're right, Karina, you know, this will vary enormously on audience, but you don't need to tell them everything. In fact, sometimes the goal, if we go back to the time traveler, the goal, yes, is to get their hand into the X-ray machine, but actually the goal is to get them trusting you and asking more questions. Because, you know, if you're pitching for a multi-million-dollar ARC grant or for an industry engagement project or something like that, no one is going to be convinced by a 2-minute, 3-minute pitch. No one is going to go, that's the one, we'll do that. Instead, a good pitch will have someone saying, oh, that does sound like that's something we can work with. We'll have to do a lot of due diligence from here, and we'll have to work through all those details. But the pitch is about opening the door. The pitch is about saying, this might be a place where I have a solution to your problem, but we can't solve everything in 3 minutes. Let's use the pitch to open that door. All right, let's get that third person having a chance on theirs. So same as before, 1-minute pitch, give them some feedback, 30-second pitch, give them some feedback, and then we'll have some final questions and go from there. Discussion, we had this thing. I know.
It's amazing how fast the time goes.
It does. And look, one of the things that we know about when we run these workshops, you all love talking to each other. And I want to give as much time as possible to do that. You know, if we had this over a day, we can stretch out a lot more, but it's a great chance for people to meet other people and hear about their research. So I'd love to give you more, but you know, that's not my job. My job is to bring you back here and wrap this thing up. Thank you for that. Anything you noticed, anything that worked super well in cutting down to the key story of your work?
I think what I really liked was, can I speak about your work, Sally? Is that okay? What I really liked seeing about Sally was we had quite a bit of trouble to start with because she went first, so it's always harder to go first. But then she flipped the idea around and started talking about what she wanted to get to, she put at the front. And awesome. It worked really well. And because we only had 2 in our group, we were able to also, when we went back the third time, she went from a 15-second back to a 1 minute, and it was so succinct and nicely put together.
That's great. Oh, yeah. I didn't prime Victoria to say that. Sally, you didn't. Anyway, but that makes so much sense to me that so often we live down in the details. You know, our day jobs are in the spreadsheets, in the details where we're right there. But we have to step around and talk to a very different group, and we might be, here's where we want to get to. And that's the more important thing to go from.
So can I ask, when we're talking about a pitch, what structure would you suggest is maybe the most beneficial? You've mentioned the and, but, therefore, but look, scientists do have a tendency to go, okay, background information first, then build on the results, then build on the conclusion. Yep. And that flipped model of conclusion first. And then there's obviously different ways to do it. In the context of a, say, 2-minute pitch to industry, what would you suggest?
As much as possible, story is always gonna work. But focus on the problem first and say how you will then provide a solution. So as much as possible, if you can say, we know that the world has a big challenge with hunger, cancer, whatever it is. There are many aspects to this, but one of the compelling problems is this bit. I've been working on something that will help to address that, or here's how my thing can help into that. So there is a bit, it depends a little bit on who that audience that you're talking to, but problem and solution. You can't put solution before problem. That's never going to work. But recognizing that you share the problem with the audience is going to be the first thing, and then that you have that solution. Story structures, there are many. The simple story structures of and, but, therefore is a great place to start. See where you can put that but, and then therefore I'm going to do this, is a great place to begin. Now it's 2:59. I can hang around for a bit. I don't have any more meetings, but Karina, did you want to tell people to go away? People might have things to do. I don't know. Or look, I can answer questions and we can chat.
Yeah, look, if we're at the end of the 2 hours, first I'll just have a bit of a big thank you, Will, for putting the time into this and being willing to be here. And I can see some happy faces. So I'm hoping that everybody feels like they got some value out of this. If you have got time to hang around for maybe a few minutes longer, we'll see if we can get some questions. Although I know Natalia has to run and she's the one hosting, so she'll have to shut it down. I don't know if you can give a conduit for possible follow-up questions, but of course, beyond Will, Natalia and myself are always available to help with these things as well. So feel free to come to us with questions about comms related things and how to think about pitching your science. We'll try our best to help. I guess I just made a few notes and I thought maybe then I could put a few things out in points of summary that I think are really the most valuable things to walk away from in considering how to put your pitches together. One is use one another. If you're going to move forward with writing a pitch, use one another or use your parents or use someone. Try practicing these pitch approaches with another person, see what works, iterate on that. Definitely don't just go away, write it down, video it, think that's the end of the story and wait till the end, but rather use the next month while you're working on this to iterate and get feedback from other people. And part of this process will give you opportunities to do that with the feedback clinics and with the day with the GRDC itself. But obviously in the meantime, the best thing that you can do for yourselves is to also do that. Something I say to all scientists is I think it is great to have some of these go-to explanations of your work, your key messages in your back pocket. So even outside and above and beyond this, spending that time to just come up with a few key things that you know you can pull out of the bag as soon as anyone asks you about your science, that you start to feel very comfortable saying it, then you know, and that you know works really well with whichever audience you're speaking to, and having those in your back pocket. So when you end up getting put into an exercise like this and have to do something off the cuff, you actually have something you can confidently fall back to as a starting point. And I think that's a really valuable tool or thing for everybody to have in science in their back pocket. And the other thing I guess I just wanted to re-emphasize, which Will said, was the goal of a pitch is not to cram everything in. It really is to just get an attention, an initiation point, something for someone to grab onto and start asking more questions. So don't treat this pitch like your average science presentation where you are trying to cram everything in and get it all across. Use it as something to initiate interest. There might be gaps in what you present, but if you've got that spark and you've got that interest and you've got someone wanting more, then you've succeeded in pitching successfully, I think. So they were the sort of things I've written down that I think are really probably valuable walkaways. We're at 1:02 now, so maybe time for a question or two, Natalia, depending on how you're going, or did you want to chime in here as well?
It's fine. I am fine. Yes. If people have questions, I am fine too.
Okay. Anyone want to ask any questions of Will then?
For the GRDC event, how is it going to go? We present, this pitch would be presented to them and then there are questions, or?
Yeah, so we're going to have, we're still figuring out the specifics of the structure, but what is very likely to happen is there'll be an open forum at the beginning where a handful of the presentation or the pitches will be presented to everybody, including attendees like yourselves and the GRDC members. And then we'll have some subsequent ones in breakaway rooms that are a little bit more targeted, but in those spaces, you'll then have an opportunity to sit with the GRDC member who's in any one of those given breakout rooms and get some feedback and information directly from them on your pitches. In both cases, when those 2-minute pitches get presented, we're hoping to allow for at least a minute or so following that for questions as well. So there will be some degree of you engaging firsthand on the day. I think, is that a fair summary, Natalia and the other industry members? I think, oh, Michael's still here. Megan had to run, of how we think we're going to run it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So it'll have a degree of pre-record and a degree of live and a degree of feedback all embedded on the day.
So with the videos, are you just wanting us to record our pitch, or does it have any images or anything from our work that you envisage? Or
so the email that I sent you out last week did have some basic guidelines for how to produce your video pitch in them. So I'd suggest going back to that, and if you have any further questions, ask. What we've done in there is define like our minimum requirements, just so that we can end up with a handful of videos at the end that we can use on the day that are all roughly along the same format lines. But we really want to give you that flexibility to take that and run with it how you want. The one thing we put in there though is we've emphasized not to rely too heavily on a whole bunch of slides. So we've said no more than one slide in the background. If you are going to use slides at all, which you don't have to as well, you can just pitch to screen without anything. But that is that relying a little bit more heavily on your own storytelling and less on a bunch of data that's sitting on a slide in the background. I don't know if Will might want to add to that.
Yes, and I think that we put a date in 15 days. So there will be opportunities also to have feedback sessions that we have called pitch clinics in 3 dates. So we will send you all those details later on, because I think that will help. Sorry, Will.
I've just reposted the links in the chat for those guideline documents, but it was attached to the email that had this event invite on it. So you should be able to go back to that as well. Will, did you have anything to add in regards to how to put together a pitch itself?
Focus on your story. Don't in any pitch. Don't start with PowerPoint. Start with think about it in the shower. Think about it elsewhere. Think about, okay, what do I need to say to get across here? If you're going to use a slide, put that in once you've worked out what the story is. Worked out, okay, this is the arc of the story, the problem that people have, and the solution I can provide. Start with that, and then you might say, oh, okay, and here's where some imagery might be really useful or something like that. Focus first and foremost on the words that come out of your mouth and how you can show that via your body language and your tone and what you're saying. Then PowerPoints can be useful, but don't focus on that first. Focus first and foremost on what is my story. Think about it in a 15-second version first, and then think, okay, that's a good structure for a story. How can I make a longer version, and then a longer version out to 3 minutes?
I think you treat your slide and or an image as, can it add value to your story? Yeah. And if it can't, if you can tell a much better story without it, then you don't need it. If you think it can add something more, then sure, utilize it, but utilize it in a clever, succinct way.
As much as possible. You want your audience focusing on you. If it supports, that's great, but beyond that.
Any other last questions while we're here? Everybody's got a lot to digest.
Time for lunch or a cup of tea.
Yeah. Thank you all for sticking it out for 2 hours straight.
And for breakfast.
Oh,
breakfast.
Yeah, it's 7 o'clock now for me. So I started at 5 today.
Same here.
They are in Switzerland and...
Are you in Germany?
Germany.
Okay. I'm in Switzerland at the moment.
Wow.
Well, thank you for getting up early.
Just getting daylight now, see? It was still dark before.
Yes.
And I was wondering why it was dark behind you too.
It's so funny though. We could be running this, and I literally didn't know. You just don't know.
Exactly.
Someone is joining from Europe. There you go.
Yep, exactly.
The modern way, eh? Oh.
Without Corona, it could be worse. We could be all over the place.
I know, right?
It's a bit hard to travel at the moment.
It's impossible to travel at the moment.
Yeah, and to travel back.
Yeah.
Travel back.
Look, I think a few people are having to pop off now, so I'll wrap it up, but I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for actually actively getting involved, engaging, asking questions and participating. I do hope you all got some value, and of course, we will follow up to try and get some feedback. Again, a big thank you to Will for giving us his time to do this, and we'll, I guess even act as a conduit back to Will if there were any questions that Will could help with. Otherwise, engage with that document, go ahead, start putting together your pictures. We'll reconnect with you in a couple of weeks' time when the first draft of your video should be done. And of course, let us know if you are one of the ones that weren't going to be presenting or weren't committed to doing an EI on the day but would still like to do a pitch. Just let us know so we know to anticipate that video coming in from you. I think that's probably everything. Natalia, Will, anything else you want to just add, or is that it?
No.
Only to say thank you to all of you for joining in, diving in.
Thank you.
Will, you're a legend.
Thank you.
And if you're in the ACT, there's a